The context for the Roundtable on broadening the scope of transport appraisal is one in which the objects of transport policy and planning are being fundamentally rethought in many OECD countries. Broadening here is not just about adding extra elements in appraisal, but about a more fundamental rethink of how the whole decision process works. It's increasingly argued that there should be a change in focus from a mobility perspective to an accessibility perspective. That recognizes that as transport is a derived demand, the purpose of transport policy is to enable people and goods to reach destinations in order to participate in various activities. Secondly, a key focus within the accessibility perspective is on providing equitable access, the concept that everyone should enjoy an acceptable minimum level of accessibility. So the distribution of the benefits of transport investment is a central consideration, as it is in other policy fields, such as education and healthcare. Distributional issues should be considered both in terms of geographical areas, but also most importantly, at individual or household levels. And thirdly, transport planning has to have regard to the long-term strategic objectives of public policy. In particular, the decarbonisation of transport is critical and will require fundamental changes to the shape of the current transport system. Ensuring that these new policy priorities are achieved effectively and efficiently requires us to adapt current appraisal techniques so that key dimensions of the benefits sought through transport investments are reliably included in the analysis, measured accurately, and weighted appropriately. Several improvements to appraisal techniques were identified during the roundtable, some of which are already relatively well established and other less developed. In particular, traditional cost-benefit analysis, CBA, can be modified to address equity concerns by incorporating distributional weights of various types. However, factoring equity issues directly into CBA requires disaggregated assessment by group, for example, according to income, gender, or spatial location, and weighting the results. Choosing the appropriate weights to be applied to reflect underlying policy objectives is a challenging task. It may be more transparent and informative to present the results for each group separately rather than producing an overall average. You get more information that way. Secondly, a range of supplementary analyses, including various kinds of accessibility measures, as well as analyses of carbon impacts of various options, can be adopted and integrated with the results of CBA through the use of multi-criteria analysis. Preparing a short summary appraisal document for decision makers to highlight the result of the supplementary analyses and their implications for broader policy objectives alongside the CBA results is probably more effective than trying to produce a single monetized result. While concerns were expressed during the roundtable that CBA results in many cases remain unduly prominent in practice of the decision criterion, even when incorporated within a broader framework. This approach provides substantially more information to decision makers and through greater transparency provides the basis for broader engagement on priorities and choices. Case studies from Israel, for example, demonstrated the potential for detailed analysis of the distribution of accessibility at the geographical level to be applied in tandem with CBA and to strongly influence policy choice. However, while a number of improvements to traditional appraisal methods were identified and it was agreed that these were valuable in themselves, a strong conclusion from the roundtable that a broader response to the changing objectives of transport policy is required. This must extend beyond project appraisal to encompass the whole transport planning process. A key perspective is that improved project appraisal cannot change outcomes if the right projects are not selected for appraisal. This highlights the importance of ensuring that the process of identifying projects also reflects or responds to the changing objectives of transport policy. Improving the way projects are reviewed against broader policy objectives and identifying alternative approaches to improving accessibility in the initial needs case in typical appraisal processes are therefore particularly critical. The increasing use of strategic planning in transport, as in a number of other policy domains, was noted, and that's been documented in the ITF's recent Strategic Infrastructure Planning Working Group report, on which we got a report at the beginning of the roundtable. It was considered that this approach offered important advantages in terms of ensuring that a coordinated and consistent approach to transport infrastructure investment was taken, which reflected long-term priorities. This is likely to yield significantly better outcomes than a simple aggregation project by project. That said, it's essential that strategic plans themselves are reviewed and updated periodically to ensure their continued relevance and consistency with public policy priorities. Ex post evaluation is often argued to be an essential element in improving appraisal practice, particularly by helping to identify systemic biases and provide a basis for improving ex ante methodologies. However, it was recognized that there are limits to the transferability of the results from one project to another and from one country to another. A key insight, highlighted in particular by French experience in using permanent observatories as the basis for evaluation, is that data is often fleeting in nature. Thus, it's important to start the data gathering for ex post studies at the start of the project to avoid significant data loss. This includes, for example, real-time information on prices. Maintaining such observatories over a sufficiently long period to capture the full impact of a project and ensuring their independence are also critical to their successful use. It was also argued that the reform of transport planning should encompass decision processes themselves in recognition of the complexity and the so-called wicked nature of the problems being addressed. A key requirement is to minimize the risk of planning failures. Key contributors to such failures are the wide range of uncertainties inherent in decision-making about major, long-lived transport infrastructure, the wide range of stakeholders involved, and the fact that many exercise at least partial veto rights. These factors mean that the so-called decide, announce, defend paradigm is unfit for purpose with respect to decisions about large-scale, long-lived investments. Instead, a so-called cognitive, rational, multi-stage model may be required, which allows decisions to be made progressively as the necessary information base is developed and enables decisions to be revisited and modified in the light of changing circumstances or data. Using information from an Italian project, it was seen that ensuring stakeholder engagement from the earlier stages of the process is an essential element of a successful model. Positive engagement can improve the quality of decisions by providing important additional data on risks, attitudes, and options. It also greatly increases the legitimacy of the resulting decisions, reducing the likelihood that planning failures will result from a subsequent withdrawal of consent. In sum, a sound decision-making model should effectively integrate the three key elements of technical assessment, process management, and public engagement. Many of the elements recommended here have been incorporated into national assessment procedures already, but are often overlooked as successive reforms have resulted in changing emphases and sometimes overly complicated processes. Streamlining existing procedures to focus on the needs case at the outset and the effective communication of meaningful results to decision makers is as important as innovating with new methods of assessment. Thank you.